Hey guys, Freddy here. Welcome back to another House Rules video, and this time I'm going to cover magic. But this is the video where I'm going to be doing it all wrong. Because there's no way I can cover everything in magic. Unlike other things like skills or initiative, which all role-playing games model on the real world, magic is limited by your imagination and your game world. So, magic in Dungeons & Dragons is going to be very different to magic in Shadowrun, which is going to be very different to magic in Ars Magica. And I can't cover every single game in every different way they will cover it. So, there's no doubt that I'm going to miss some stuff that you can think of. So this might be worth a revisit if people add into the comments what they want. Games I forgot to cover, which do magic in a completely different way, which will be worth documenting more. Now, as usual, I'm going to go through a few games. I think I've picked out 6 or 7 different games from my collection, and I detail how magic works. Now, I'm going to try and be a bit more quick, because these videos do tend to drag on to about half an hour. So I'm trying to only spend a minute or so on each game to cut the length of the video down a bit. And as usual, after I've gone through those, we'll go over to the computer desktop, we'll have a look at the document, and we will create a magic system for this game we are developing together. But anyway, let's go over and have a look at some games. So, first of all, we've got Dungeons & Dragons. Now, this is 5th edition, but basically Dungeons & Dragons has used the same magical rules throughout all its editions, using a system which people refer to as Vancian magic. Now, Vancian magic follows 3 main rules. First of all, that magical effects are packaged up into spells, and spells have a very particular effect. So, for example, here we've got Fireball. Now, Fireball creates a large fiery blast, which does lots of damage to the vicinity. But a wizard can't tune that down to light a cigarette with it or light the campfire, unless he wants to let off a huge blast which will destroy most of the camp as well. Now, feats and things have been introduced in later editions of Dungeons & Dragons, which allow wizards to tune the spells down, or up, where they can change the area of effect, they can tailor it, they can change the damage up or down slightly. But these are only minor effects. They don't allow the total flexibility of a wizard, if they're powerful enough, letting off a fireball which does absolutely massive damage, destroying a huge area, or right down to just creating a small light. The second rule is that spells are like bullets. You package them up ahead of time. The wizard memorizes them, and when they're cast, they're gone. So the wizard is like a gun, being loaded up with spells, and when they're fired off, they're gone. Now, like the tailoring of spells which they've introduced in later editions, they've also introduced cantrips into later editions of Dungeons & Dragons, which are basically 0-level spells which a wizard can cast over and over, so they are never completely out of magic. They just are reduced to getting rid of their more powerful spells, they've cast those, and they can keep using these minor magic. And finally, spells are pre-packaged, so you're memorizing a particular type of spell. So while you might have access to all 3rd level spells, because you've got them in your spell book, you can only memorize a certain amount of them. So your wizard, as they go up levels, get more flexibility, they learn more memory slots, and they can carry basically more ammunition for their spells. Next up, Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. Now, this is the 1st edition because I absolutely adore this game. It's been out for ages and it's been fun from the first day. Now, magic in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay works in a similar fashion. So you get wizards which go up levels and they get access to different spells. However, where it differs is these spells are not one-shot. Our wizard in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay has magic points, and each spell cast takes away from those magic points. So, while the wizard is limited into how many spells they can cast in a day, it's not particular types of spells. So it's not like in Dungeons & Dragons where you get 1 3rd level spell, and when you've cast that, it's gone. In Warhammer, you've got a certain amount of magic points, and if you burn through all of those casting low-level spells, you'll obviously be able to cast more. But the higher level spells will use more points and burn through your magic points quicker. So, in a similar fashion to Dungeons & Dragons, wizards in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay have a limited resource, and they can only cast a certain amount of spells per day. Next up, jumping genres, we've got Deadlands Hell on Earth, a post-apocalyptic magical game, where a nuclear war, or a war has happened, but instead of nuclear weapons, it's been magical weapons. Now in Deadlands, the main magical class is the Doomsayers, who get powers basically equal to spells. Now when they cast their spells or use their powers, they get strain. So they are taking health damage of a type for channeling the atomic energy across. And if we go to their powers, which are basically spells, we've got things like Atomic Blast, which has a target number, so they need to roll a skill to be able to cast it, which is different from Dungeons & Dragons and Warhammer, where the spells are automatic. They just have a limited resource. It has the strain that it takes, how fast it is, and its duration and range. So these are pre-packaged abilities where they are limited, range 20 yards per faith level, speed 1. And these can't be changed too much. But you're taking strain for it and you're having to use a skill to actually activate the abilities. Next up, we're back to fantasy with Earthdawn, one of my favourite role-playing games of all time. Now, Earthdawn is a world of magic, so that everybody in the world uses it. So a simple warrior will be weaving magic into his swordplay, so causing him to do more damage, causing himself to be harder to hit, etc. Even a simple baker will be taking magic and weaving it into the goods he bakes, the loaves of bread, etc., to make them more sustaining. But wizards do exist. Now wizards use what are called spell matrices. Oh, I've gone past it. Spell matrices are basically slots. So where a Dungeons & Dragons wizard will be able to learn a certain amount of spells of each level, wizards in Earthdawn have spell matrices, which then they can put spells into and cast from there. Now this isn't just simple memorization when the spell is cast it's gone. It remains in this matrix until it is replaced. And there's rules here for changing it on the fly, being able to be in combat and swap your spells out. But usually it's a matter of rolling to cast threads, because you are weaving the spell. So you are casting the threads, so best face here has 2 threads, so you need to successfully do those. It also has effects based on your attributes, so your charisma, what rank you are, is your duration, casting difficulty, target spell defense. So you are having to roll a skill as well to make the spell take effect, and you are able to cast the spells which you have stored in your head. Jumping genres again, we've got Call of Cthulhu. Now Call of Cthulhu differs from the other games we've covered so far, because the spells in Call of Cthulhu aren't going to be ones that you are firing off in the middle of combat. Magic is something you do learn, but it's something you tend to use far more rarely, because it has permanent effects. Now if we flick on to the magic section, we can see that magic is powered by magic points. So as well as making a skill roll to see whether your spell has been successful, you're powering by magic points which come from your power. So you have a limited resource each day of how much magic you can spend. But also, if we flick onto some of the spells, we can see that they have other costs. So using Voris Sign costs the user 1 magic point and 1 sanity. So casting a spell in Call of Cthulhu will not just cause you power loss, which means you are weaker that day, and that will recover as you rest, but it costs you permanent sanity in a lot of cases. So this is a limited resource. Your character only has a certain amount of sanity across their life, and yes, saving the day and completing adventures will earn them sanity back. But most of the time, your sanity is going down and down, so magic's something you're not going to be using, although you have access to it all the time, because once you've learned a spell, you always know that spell. Jumping genres again, we've got Shadowrun. Now this is 2nd edition. I've chosen this not because magic works any differently in it, because I do love that picture. Larry Elmore artwork, absolutely gorgeous. Now magic in Shadowrun works by channeling power through your nervous system. So you can take physical damage. A mage will learn spells and they will always be in their head, because they are a skill that they've learned. And they're making skill rolls to succeed, and that will lead to the effects. But spells also have drain. So the force of the spell that's cast, which will affect its area of effect and damage and whatever it does, and the damage level. And they have to roll drain to save against that damage. Now, if things go badly enough, they will take stun damage, and that can even go through to physical damage as they burn out their nervous system. But it's just damage, so you can heal it up. You can even use magic to heal it up. But that's how magic works. The mages always have spells in their head, but they are drawing it through their nervous system and burning the nervous system to bring that magic through. Now, often mages can save against it completely, reducing the damage to 0. So mages in Shadowrun tend to be able to cast a lot more spells than in other games. They do tend to cast spells almost constantly. And on to science fiction with Rifts, although Rifts is really multi-genre, because the rifts have opened and beings are coming through from other dimensions, and some of the dimensions have magic in them. So, wizards exist in the world of Rifts, and magic works in a similar fashion to Warhammer or Deadlands. Similar in Warhammer in that you're going up a certain levels and gaining access to various spells, but also that you're using a set resource. In Rifts, it's PPE, your potential psychic energy. And that's a resource that you're burning through each day. However, in Rifts, one of the nice things is that you can source PPE from other sources. So you can draw it from magical artifacts, you can drain it from living beings, whether you're doing it without their knowledge, with their knowledge and consent, so they're granting you it, you're taking it from an unwilling subject. You can't drain it from a practitioner of magic, but you can take it from the living. And you can get it from your environment, because there's ley lines and nexuses. And these are magical places on Earth, where you instantly get extra energy, and your magic is more powerful, because you're not having to drain it through your own body or from your own power. Now, like things like Deadlands, you're making skill rolls to cast the spells. They're not automatic effects like in Warhammer, like in Dungeons & Dragons. And finally, onto the ultimate multi-genre game, Gurps. So, in Gurps, if you want to be playing a fantasy game with magic, you're playing a fantasy game with magic. But if you want to be playing Star Trek but with wizards, you can be playing Star Trek but with wizards. Now, magic in it works in a similar fashion to the rest of the system. So you're spending your resources on buying access to spells. But it requires skill rolls. So, in order to cast a spell, you must know that spell, or possess an item that lets you use that spell. Then you have to spend 1 or more turns in concentration. So you need to make a concentration test. So it's skill-based for success. But spells also use a resource called mana. So the spells have a cost to them. And this is your limiting resource. Like the spell slots in Dungeons & Dragons, like the power in Call of Cthulhu, etc. This is the cost that you're going through. You're spending your mana to be able to cast a certain amount of spells each day. And then you're having to rest to get that mana back. So here we are with the Google document of the rules we've been working on. Now, hopefully I'll remember to link them in the description down below. I've done so in the past, but that never means anything because I can often forget. But hopefully I've done that. Now, the first sections of this are all the same. I haven't really changed anything since the last video where I did the Lifepath. I've fleshed out a couple of tiny bits of that, but not much changed at all throughout the rest of the rules, until we come to the very end. And with the advancement section, I've added magical powers to that. They are more expensive than increasing tributes, but not much. Times 5 cost of what you're going to instead of a times 4 cost of what you're coming from. So it's a little bit more expensive to go up, but you're basically starting at 0 anyway. Now, magic in this set of rules, I've decided to be skill-based, but across multiple skills. Now, if you wanted to use something like Vancian magic in the system that we've come up with, where basically your skills are being rated on a number of points, you could make it up based on 2 skills. One would be your spell level, allowing you to access more powerful spells as you increase that level. And your other would be your spell number, so the number of spells that you can store in your head and then cast. Now, obviously, that would lead to a fairly small amount, because we're talking about 1 to 5 mainly. But you could access that in different ways, so perhaps it's logarithmic, so 1 is 1 spell, 2 is 2 times 2, 4, 3 is 3 times 3, so 9, and up to 5, which is 25 spells total, whichever way you want it. And you could, as I said, have spell powers, so you could rank your spells going from basically Magic Missile at level 1 up to your higher level ones, which are your fireballs and all that. But anyway, I decided to not go that way. I decided to break it down by elemental planes. So magic is cast by accessing elemental planes of power. Fire, water, air, earth, and mind, drawing power through the caster's body and mixing them together to get different effects. The primary power is used to create the main effect and to actually cast the spell, while the secondary power allows the spell to have greater effect. So we've got the elemental planes, or elemental powers as I've described them. So we've got the primal force of energy and destruction, fire. We've got water, which is the primal force of life and healing. Air, the primal force of speed and time. Earth, the primal force of strength and resistance. And mind, the force which represents the connection between people and their energy and life force. So we can manipulate those in different ways. So anything which is going to increase the caster's reflexes or increase somebody's reflexes would be air-based. But it'd be affecting a person, so its secondary effect would probably be mind. So, example spells. I've basically made one up for each, but I've got a larger list on a different document, which I will work my way through at some point in the future. So we've got Fire Blast. Each success on a fire magic test can do 1 damage to everything within up to air magic meters. So, if you've got a fire magic skill of 3, you'll roll 3 dice, and any successes you get cause damage. If you've got air magic, then that expands it out. So if you have no air magic attribute or skill, it will be a single point of fire you're firing, so you'll hit 1 target. Otherwise, you can extend it out to create a fireball. Levitate. Each success on an air magic test allows the caster to move a being, including themselves, at up to 10 meters per round and carry 1 additional being for every point of earth magic. So, air magic is speed, so how fast you move through the air. Earth magic is strength, so how much you can lift. Healing. Each success on a water magic test heals 1 damage to a target, including themselves, with mind magic also providing additional points of healing. So, it's a single person, but you could come up with a secondary spell where it's an air magic test which creates the points of healing, but a secondary one, so mind perhaps, which is the number of people affected. So you can cast an area effect heal spell. We've got Armour. Each success on an earth magic test provides 1 point of resistance to damage for this round, with a water magic extending this by 1 round for each point. So you create armour by getting your success on earth magic test, but it lasts longer for having water magic. Basically, I came to the idea that it would be water magic because it's water washing the earth away. The more control you've got over that, the longer the earth stays. And finally, we've got Read Mind. Any next successes on a contested test between the caster's mind magic versus the target's willpower leads to the caster being able to read the surface thoughts of the target for 1 round, extended by 1 round for every point of air magic. So again, air is primal force of speed and time, so the amount of time that the power lasts. Now, I haven't decided whether you will have to buy these spells. Perhaps there will be like 1 point of experience to buy a different spell, or whether everybody's got access to everything. I haven't decided that yet. And whether players can come up with their spells, or whether we're going to be working from a spell list, and these are just going to be examples of that. Now, as I said, I do have a longer list myself, basically lifted out an older role-playing game I wrote many years ago, which had psychic powers which worked in this kind of fashion. So a number of the spells will work the same. Now, when casting a spell, and you fail, When an attempt at casting magic fails, there is a random effect as magic is brought into the world but is unleashed outside the caster's control. 1d6 on the below table to discover the effect. If there is a net negative amount of successes, then these add to the dice roll. So you roll 1d6 if you fail. However, if you've got additional failures, minuses which came away from your successes, so you're rolling -1, 2, etc., then you're rolling a d6 and adding that to get a higher effect. Now at the low levels, these are simple damage. So 1, 2, 3 and 4 are the energy dragged through from the elemental plane, blasts through the caster, causing them 1 point of damage, or 2 points of damage, or 3 points of damage, or 4 points of damage. Basically, you're pulling magic through and it burns your body because you haven't controlled it properly. At level 5, stunned. The energy dragged through from the elemental plane causes shock to the caster's system, meaning they are stunned and lose 1 dice from all tests for the next hour. And 6 is stunned as well, but lose 1 dice for all tests for the next day. So a much longer effect. Now, these I see as worse, which is why they're higher up. And if you've got net failures, which are adding to this dice roll, why that becomes more successful, or more possible rather. Now we've got 7, 8 and 9 here, which are the higher levels, which you can only get if you've got net negatives. And these are pretty unlikely, because it's pretty unlikely you'll have so many net negatives to take this up, but also be rolling a 6 on the fail dice here. So you would have to get the effect of 10, to have failed by 4 net failures. So not just got 0 successes, but got 4 failures on top of that. And then rolled a 6 on this dice. So that's pretty negative and a massive failure. Anyway, at 7, explosion. A surge of energy bursts through from the elemental plane, causing 1d4 points of damage to everyone within 1d6 meters. This damage may be resisted normally. So there's an explosion of energy and people's armor can take it. They can roll their bodies to resist damage. We've got a magical explosion, which is the same, but this damage may not be resisted normally. So it's just damage you instantly take. So an 8 is far worse, as everybody gets 1d4 points of damage, without any chance to soak it. At 9, disruption. The caster's ability to cast spells is disrupted. They cannot cast any spells for 2d6 hours. So up to 12 hours, the spellcaster isn't capable of doing anything. And on 10, we've got negation. The caster's body is racked by energy, which damages their ability to cast spells, and they lose 1 point from whatever magic skill they were using. So basically, they're losing a chunk of experience and the current skill that they're using because they failed so bad. But that's just an idea. We've got some negative effects here if you fail. We've got some elemental abilities which can be used to shape magic. It kind of seems to suit the system and the setting, because magic can be a bad thing. It's dangerous and not everybody's going to want to use it. But anyway, I think I've whittled on for quite long enough as usual. So thank you very, very much for watching. As always, most of all, you look after yourselves, and I'll catch you later. Bye now.